Today's video is kind of a special one. Why is it special? Because I'm in my pickup truck and I am now driving for maybe 3.5 hours to go get some sphagnum moss. Why would I drive that far for sphagnum moss? Well, I ordered sphagnum moss on Amazon and I got Amazon. So we have to go source out a large quantity of sphagnum moss. We're then going to use this sphagnum moss and we're gonna build a living wall inside the enclosure. Now, if any of you are plant dorks like I am, then you may have heard of Kaylee Ellen. If you have heard of Kaylee Ellen, then you will know that it's her gigantic living wall that inspired this idea for this enclosure. If you haven't heard of her, but you still are kind of a plant dork like me, definitely look her up. She runs a shop in the UK. Look her up on Instagram or on YouTube. She did a series on how she built the wall. I'm gonna build mine a little bit different, but that's where the inspiration came from. And if you have absolutely no interest in learning how she did that, you don't care, you don't want to see it, you don't really care about plants, you're just here to build a pretty awesome enclosure, well, stay tuned for our regular scheduled programming. Hey guys, what's up? This is editing me. So, two things. Yes, this video is long. It's like 16 minutes. You should know when I started, it was 2 hours. So, I've cut a lot of video out of this. I also sped it up pretty much as fast as it can go without it going warp speed. So, if 16 minutes is too long, just skip it. Second, yes, I know I look like Shrek's mom. I'm well aware. We live in the northern part of Canada, so it doesn't get hot here, ever. We don't have air conditioning, but for whatever reason, we're in the middle of a heat wave, and it's hot. So, don't be rude with your comments, okay? So, total disclaimer, I winged this whole thing. I started off by making measurements of how much of this gridding that I would need. This is just a plastic mesh netting that I ordered on Amazon. And what I'm doing here is I'm just measuring the pieces that I need to fit the back wall, and I'm measuring them in place so that it's going to fit pretty snug. I don't want Toad to be able to get in behind this. I measured 2 pieces and cut them identical. They are tight fitting side to side. Top to bottom, they run straight to the floor, but only up as far as the vents go. I decided to run these all the way down to the floor of the enclosure so that if there is some extra water sitting in the drainage layer, the moss would soak it up and it's not sitting there stagnant. So I started the back wall just by laying one of the 2 pieces flat and packing about a 2-inch thick layer of sphagnum moss over top of it. I made it a little thicker because I know it will compress, so I didn't want it to be super flat. I need a little bit of substance there to allow my plants to root into it. Then all I did was I used zip ties to secure all around the edges. I also put zip ties through center pieces in this panel, and the reason I'm doing that is once I stand this up on its end, I don't want all that sphagnum moss to shift and move to the bottom. I want it to keep a tight
even layer throughout the entire panel, even once it gets wet and once it's been up for quite some time. Building this panel, the longest part was attaching all these zip ties to make sure this stayed tight and in shape. Once I'm done, I cut all these zip tie ends, and I do that on the back side so that there's no pokey bits that could scratch him, and then I put it in place. So next I'm going to repeat the same process for the sides. The sides will take 4 pieces of this plastic mesh, and they were cut to fit. I didn't get video of that. And I'm just going to repeat the whole thing. I'm going to pack them through with sphagnum. I'm going to zip tie all the edges, and then I'm going to throw a few zip ties in the center just so that it stays tight and nothing shifts out of place. So once I have the 3 panels together, I need to attach them to the walls, and this is what I'm going to use. If you don't know what these are actually automotive wire cable ties, and these are used to hold like your engine harnesses under the hood of your car. And those little plug parts, they just plug into a hole and they will grab on all by themselves, assuming you drill the hole just a slight bit smaller than the plug itself. So all I'm doing here is I'm marking where I put the plugs so that I can go in and drill out the holes. Drilling PVC is really easy, but it does leave some shavings behind. If you drill it really slow, then your shavings will actually come off all in one piece and you can just pick it right up. Here I have a automatic irrigation pump, and I'm going to install this so that it sends water straight into the moss panels and waters the plants that I'm going to root into these. I purchased this pump on Amazon for, I want to say it was only about $50, and it came with all the hoses, attachments. I believe it came with about 12 nozzles in total. The instructions were pretty straightforward and it was pretty simple to install. I did fast forward this video pretty quick because the process was a little long, but all I've done is I put the nozzles in kind of where I wanted them, and then I started running my tubing from the unit itself into the enclosure. It's going to come into the enclosure through one of the pre-drilled holes in the back that are used for wiring and whatnot, and then I'm just cutting each piece of hose individual to run from one nozzle to the next. If you actually decide to build paneled walls like this, I just want to say these are not, the pump itself is not something that you have to install. I chose to install this because it works out well for me. I'm a little lazy when it comes to watering, and when you root plants into moss like this, you kind of got to keep them a little bit more on the damp side. And sometimes I do tend to go away for a few days at a time, or I get caught up with life and I forget to do things like that. So this seemed like an easy solution for me. So here I'm using an empty spaghetti sauce jar to hold some water. I am using distilled water for this irrigation pump because I don't want sediments forming in the bottom of the jar, and I don't want algae forming in the lines. I want to keep it as clean as possible, so I'm going to go ahead and just use distilled water. I'm not going to add anything to it, no fertilizers, no additives, anything, just plain distilled water. At this point, I set the irrigation pump to run for 1 minute per day. I'm not sure how that will work out in terms of keeping it damp, but it seemed like a good starting point. So this is what it looked like completed with the walls up and the pump installed. As you can see, with the door open, I'm sitting at about 60% humidity, which is pretty high. I'm interested to see how this turns out in the long run.